Chapter 6. The rain didn't come first. I expected rain. God had told Noah about the flood, and I'd spent 7 days watching that sealed door and imagining clouds rolling in, the sky darkening, water falling the way I'd seen it fall 1,000 times before. I thought I knew what was coming. I was wrong. It started underneath. A sound like the earth groaning in its sleep. Low, deep, the kind of vibration you feel in your chest before your ears register anything. I looked at Hazel. He'd felt it too. His hand moved to his blade without thinking, a warrior's reflex, though this wasn't an enemy you could fight. The ground cracked. The earth split open 1/2 mile from where the ark stood, and water shot upward with a force that made me stagger backward. Not a spring, not a fountain, but a column of water punching through solid rock like it had been imprisoned since creation and had finally broken free. Then another opened, and another after that. Across the plains, across the hills. The springs of the deep burst open all at once, water exploding from beneath the surface in geysers that reached higher than the tallest trees. The sound was deafening, a roar so constant and complete that it became the only thing that existed. I looked up. The sky was tearing. That's the only way to describe it. The firmament, the boundary God had set between the waters above and the waters below on the 2nd day of creation, was opening. Not like clouds parting for rain. Like a dam breaking. Water poured from above in sheets so thick I couldn't see through them, falling with a weight that flattened everything it hit. Trees bent and snapped. The ground turned to mud in seconds. This wasn't rain. This was the world unmaking itself. I understood then what was happening. On the 2nd day of creation, God had separated the waters above from the waters below. He'd set boundaries, a firmament between sky and sea, holding everything in its place. Those boundaries were dissolving. The framework he'd built to make the world livable was being removed, piece by piece, and the waters were rushing back to fill the space that had been carved out for life. Creation in reverse. The ark, Hazel shouted over the roar. I could barely hear him despite him standing next to me. We have to stay with the ark. He was right. Whatever was happening to the earth, whatever God was doing, our orders were clear. Protect Noah. The rest was beyond us. We moved to the ark as the water rose around our feet. Already ankle deep, already running in channels that hadn't existed moments before, carving new paths through the clearing, swirling around the base of that enormous vessel. Inside, I could hear the animals. Lowing, bleating, calling out. Not panicked, somehow, but restless and contained. Like they knew what was happening and had accepted it. The humans were another matter. I heard one of the wives cry out. Then a child. Then Noah's voice, steady and low, cutting through the noise as it always did. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was enough. Hold on. Stay together. Trust. The water climbed. I'd fought battles. I'd watched creation. I'd seen the first murder and the exile from paradise. But nothing in all my existence had prepared me for what I saw that day. The settlement was 1/2 mile to the south. The people there, the ones who had mocked Noah for decades, who had laughed at the boat and the animals and the warnings. They heard the springs burst open. They felt the ground shake. And then they saw the water coming. I watched them run. I knew some of them. Not the way I knew Noah, not by name or habit or the sound of their prayers. But I'd patrolled their settlement for years. I'd seen the woman who wove baskets outside her door every morning. The old man who sat on the same stone each evening and watched the sun go down. The children who chased each other between the shelters, laughing at nothing. The way children do when the world still feels safe. They ran now, All of them. The basket weaver with her youngest child pressed against her chest. The old man struggling to keep his feet in the mud. The children no longer laughing. Where do you run when the earth itself is flooding? When water rises from below and falls from above, and there is no dry ground left, no high hill that stays high, no shelter that holds? They ran anyway. Some toward higher ground that wouldn't stay high. Some toward the trees, climbing, clinging to branches that bent under the water's weight. Some toward the ark, too late. The sealed door a wall of pitch-dark wood with no handle on the outside. They beat on it. I heard them beating on it over the roar of the water, fists against pitch-sealed wood, and I heard the sounds they made. Not words, just sounds. The sounds human beings make when they understand, finally, that they are going to die. I need to tell you something. I need to tell you that I wanted to open it. Every part of me that had watched God shape Adam from clay. That had seen Eve smile at her Creator. That had hoped Cain would choose differently. That had guarded Noah through decades of mockery. Every part of me wanted to reach down and open that door and let them in. But God had shut it. And what God shuts, no angel opens. I stood there in the roaring water, listening to them beat on that door, and I understood the constraint in a way I hadn't before. Not just the constraint on human free will, the rule that said I couldn't make their choices for them. This was bigger. God had made a decision, and that decision was final. And no amount of compassion or anguish or desire to help could change it. The door was shut. The time for choosing had ended. They'd had years, decades. Noah had told them every day what was coming. The animals had marched past their settlement in a procession that defied explanation. God had given them 7 final days with the door still open. They hadn't come, and now the door was shut, and I couldn't open it, and the water was rising past their ankles, past their knees, past their waists. I turned away. I had to. Not because I didn't care, because I did, and the caring was going to break me if I kept watching. The water reached the base of the ark, then the lower deck. Then the water line rose past the pitch-sealed seams, and I felt the vessel shift. A groaning of timber, the keel lifting free of the ground it had rested on for decades. The ark began to float. Around it, the world drowned. I can't tell you about all of it. I won't. Some things are too heavy to speak aloud even after all this time. But I'll tell you what I saw from above, because Hazel and I rose with the water, stationed above the ark as it lifted free of the clearing, then free of the treetops, then free of the hills. The settlements vanished first. The structures Adam's descendants had built, the shelters and forges and walls. The water covered them the way a hand covers an insect, just closed over them and moved on. Then the trees went under. Forests I'd patrolled for years, where I'd fought skirmishes and driven back the fallen, where I'd watched Noah's sons haul timber. The canopy sank beneath the surface, branches reaching upward like arms, and then those went under too. The hills followed. The high places where humans had built altars, both to God and to things that weren't God. The ridges and the valleys and the farmland and the roads. All of it sinking, surrendering, absorbed into a rising gray expanse that had no edge and no end. After a while, there was nothing left but water. I have seen things that no human being has ever seen. The spaces between galaxies, the war that split heaven, the face of God when he looks at something he loves. But I have never seen anything as terrible as that water. Not because of what it was, but because of what it covered. Every life, every story, every child who had chased another child through a settlement that no longer existed. All of it beneath the surface, held there by the weight of God's grief turned to judgment. Hazel didn't speak for 3 days after the last hill went under. I didn't blame him. There were no words for what we'd witnessed. We circled the ark in silence. 2 warriors guarding the only thing left to guard, while the rain fell and the water rose and the world became a grave. I thought about the garden. About the first morning when light split the darkness and everything was possibility. About God kneeling in the dust, shaping Adam with his hands, breathing life into clay. About the way he'd said very good and meant it with everything he was. This was the same God. The one drowning the world was the one who'd made it. I couldn't reconcile those 2 things. I couldn't make them fit inside the same understanding. So I stopped trying and just kept circling. The rain kept falling. 40 days, 40 nights. The springs of the deep kept pouring. The sky kept opening. And the water kept rising until every hill was covered, every mountain submerged, every piece of dry ground buried under cubits of churning, restless sea. The ark floated alone on the face of the deep. I stationed myself above the vessel, and Hazel took a position below, circling in the water-thick air. We weren't the only ones on guard. Michael had assigned a detail, angels positioned around the ark at intervals, watching for threats. And the threats came. The fallen hadn't left when the waters rose. Some of them had, retreating to the upper regions where they could watch from a distance and mock. But others stayed. They circled the ark the way sharks circle a wounded creature, looking for any weakness, any gap in our defense. They want to capsize it. Hazel told me during the first night. The rain hammered down around us, so heavy that the air felt more like water than sky. If they can breach the hull or overturn it, everything inside dies. They won't get through us, I said. There are a lot of them, Hazel said quietly. He was right. I counted at least 20 in the darkness around us, moving in patterns I recognized from years of fighting them. Probing, testing, looking for the moment when our attention wavered. They hit us on the 3rd night. A coordinated assault from below, driving upward through the water itself, striking at the underside of the hull. I felt the impact before I saw them. The ark shuddered. Inside, animals bellowed and humans cried out. I dove. Fighting in water was different from fighting in the void between stars. Heavier, slower. The pressure of the flood pressed against every movement, and the fallen used it against us, striking from angles the water itself concealed. I caught the first one before he reached the hull, drove him back with a blow that sent us both spinning through the murk. 2 more came from behind. I turned, blocked, struck. The water around us churned with the force of it. Bubbles and pressure, and the dull, heavy sounds of impact. One of them got past me. I felt him slip through the line and I twisted to follow, catching his ankle just before he reached the planking. He turned on me, and in the murk I saw his face. I knew him. Not well. He'd served in a different unit, one of the garrison angels who'd guarded the outer perimeter during the garden period. I remembered his voice in worship, clear and high, rising above the rest of us. Now that voice made a sound I couldn't classify. Rage or grief or something in between, as he clawed at the hull with hands that had once been raised in praise. I pulled him back. He fought me. I drove my blade into the space between us, and he recoiled, spinning away into the dark water. You're protecting a box, he snarled. A wooden box full of animals. This is what you've chosen. This is what I was told to do, I said. And when the box opens? He was circling now, looking for an opening. When the animals come out and the humans breed and the whole thing starts again, will you protect them then too? Through the next 1,000 years of failure? I didn't answer. I hit him instead. Hard enough to send him tumbling, hard enough to make the water crack and roil around us. He vanished into the depths, and I returned to my position. His questions stayed with me longer than the fight did. Hazel was fighting beside me. I could feel his presence more than see him. The familiar rhythm of a warrior I'd fought alongside for longer than this world had existed. We held the line, drove them back, sealed the gap they'd tried to open. They retreated, regrouped, came again. This pattern repeated for weeks. Not every night. The Fallen were strategic, spacing their assaults to exhaust us, hitting when we'd started to relax, withdrawing before we could press an advantage. They learned from each attack. The fourth night they struck from above, diving through the rain, trying to land on the deck and tear open the window. The seventh night they hit all four sides at once, stretching our details so thin that I was fighting two at a time, unable to help anyone else. The ninth night they rammed the hull with coordinated force, trying to crack the pitch seals. The Ark groaned under the impact. I heard Noah's wife scream inside. We held every time, but the margin got thinner. The gaps between attacks got shorter. And the exhaustion crept in, the kind that lives in your bones and doesn't leave when the fighting stops. I fought in the rain and the dark and the endless churning water, and I thought about what we were protecting. 8 people, thousands of animals, the entire future of everything God had made on this earth, sealed inside a wooden box that creaked and swayed with every wave. If the Fallen broke through, if they cracked the hull or capsized the vessel, it was over. Not just for Noah, for everything. That knowledge kept me fighting when my body wanted to stop. But it cost us. I lost Serial on the 12th night. He was young, part of the reinforcement detail Michael had sent after the first assault. A wave of Fallen hit our eastern flank while a smaller group feinted from the west. Serial pursued the feint too far, isolated himself. By the time I reached his position, the light was already collapsing. I didn't scream this time. I'd screamed for Hadayel, but grief changes shape the more you carry it. It goes from sharp to heavy, from a sound to a weight. I just stood there in the water-thick air and felt Serial disappear from the world, and the weight settled onto my shoulders alongside all the other weights I carried. "How many is that?" Hazel asked afterward. Not callously. He was counting because he needed to know our strength. 2 since I took this assignment, I said. I don't know the total. Too many, Hazel said, his voice quiet. However many it is, it's too many. I agreed with him. But the Ark floated on, and inside it, 8 people and thousands of animals breathed and ate and slept, and the world that had tried to kill them lay buried under fathoms of dark water. So we kept fighting. The days blurred together after that. Rain and darkness and water and the constant circling of enemies who never quite gave up and never quite committed to a final assault. I lost track of how many skirmishes we fought. 15, maybe 20. Each one a little different, each one costing something. Even when nobody was lost, energy, focus, the belief that this would ever end. I found myself talking to God in those long shifts between attacks. Not formal prayers. Not the kind of address you'd make before the throne. Just talking. The way Noah talked to him, without ceremony, without expecting answers. I told him I didn't understand what we were doing. I told him I'd watched his world die and I didn't know how to carry that. I told him I was tired. He didn't answer, but I kept talking. And somehow the talking itself was enough to keep me circling, keep me watching, keep me ready for the next assault. The rain stopped on the 40th day. I didn't notice at first. The sound had become so constant that its absence felt like pressure, like the silence after a blow. Then Hazel looked up, and I followed his gaze. and the sky was lighter than it had been in weeks. Not clear, not blue, but the sheets of water had thinned to ordinary rain, and then to mist, and then to nothing. The water remained, vast and featureless, stretching to every horizon, reflecting a sky that was slowly, cautiously clearing. The ark sat motionless on the surface, a wooden island in an ocean that had no shore. The fallen pulled back, not defeated. Just waiting, as they always waited. Seeing what would happen next, and inside the hull I could hear Noah praying.
Chapter Guild, Stories for Your Mind.